The jungles of Threxen Prime dripped with moisture and death. Colossal vines coiled around jagged blackstone cliffs, and the air shimmered with heat and the scent of blood. It was not a world where anything soft survived. Everything that thrived here had to be sharper, harder, faster, and above all else, merciless. And yet, a human had just landed there. The shuttle's descent had been nearly suicidal, slicing through atmospheric storms that even the Deathworld Alliance's best refused to traverse. But the pilot had made it through. Alone. From the thick fog near the ravine, a dozen sets of glowing eyes watched. The Zarnak, apex of the apex. Genetically perfected hunters. The oldest and most honored warrior caste in the galaxy. Muscles like carbon-threaded steel, claws that could rend armor, reflexes tuned to hunt even across time fractures. They were not just killers. They were symbols. They were legend. And one of them had just growled in confusion. "Is it true?" hissed the packmaster of Fongtier 9. His voice carried the sound of a saw blade against bone. "The Deathworlders brought a human? A lone specimen?" "A young one," said another, its tongue flicking from between slitted teeth. "Barely a warrior. Not enhanced. Not even armored." Laughter broke among them, low, rumbling, almost purring. The kind of sound predators make when a meal walks into the den wearing a welcome sign. But then a second voice rose, not from among the Zarnak. It came from the ravine itself. "I know you're watching," said a voice, clear, sharp, and irritatingly calm. The fog shifted. Boots stepped forward. The human stood about 5'9", by Zarnak standards, a child. He wore no armor, only a thermal-lined jacket with the sleeves rolled up and a pair of reinforced utility pants. His hair was short, regulation cut, and his hands were in his pockets. He looked around casually. Not a hint of fear. One of the younger Zarnak twitched, his claws itching for blood. "Permission to kill it?" he rasped. "Denied," the packmaster growled. "It's here for something." The human looked up at the cliff edge as if he could see them. "I'm Cadet Elias Kincaid," he said. "3rd Division Terran Diplomatic Corps, subsection, Interventional Special Threat Protocols." He smiled. "And I'm here because you abducted one of ours." The words hit the Zarnak like a thrown blade. It had been a diplomatic stunt, really. The Deathworld Alliance, those arrogant, self-proclaimed stewards of galactic balance, had seized a human ambassador's daughter. She had crossed into the red zone near Threxen space. An innocent mistake. She was just a child. But the Alliance didn't care. Humans had become too bold, too unafraid. The abduction was meant to be a warning. They hadn't expected Earth to respond like this. No fleet. No sanctions. No threats. Just a single cadet. "What is this, a joke?" one of the Zarnak whispered. The human didn't flinch. He just looked straight at the treeling. "You've got 5 minutes to bring her to me," he said. "After that I come in." Silence. And then a roar shook the cliffside. Something enormous leapt down from the canopy, a blur of armor-plated muscle and claws like broken scimitars. Zarekthal, champion of 9 wars. Genetically modified beyond even his kin. He had killed Kravari Reapers with his bare hands. Brought down aerial beasts the size of shuttles. His presence was like a black hole of fear. The cadet looked up. "You must be Thal." The beast snarled. "I accept your challenge," it growled. Elias blinked. "Challenge? Blood for blood. Honor-bound. You challenged our sovereignty. You threatened us. We accept your terms." He didn't wait. The Zarnak champion pounced. A claw the size of a human torso slashed at the cadet. Fast, too fast to dodge. But the cadet didn't dodge. He moved. It was a blur of motion, precise, deliberate. Not faster than Thal. Just smarter. He stepped inside the claw's arc, dropped his weight and slammed his elbow into a small fold just under Thal's plated ribs. It was a spot no one ever struck. Because no one ever got that close and lived. Thal stumbled. Then the cadet dropped, rolled forward, and brought both hands up into a nerve cluster near the champion's lower spinal stem. The great beast shrieked. It wasn't brute strength. It was anatomical precision. He knew where to hit. How to hurt. He wasn't fighting like a predator. He was fighting like a surgeon dissecting a living bomb. Thal roared and swung again. The cadet ducked under it and drew something from his belt. A baton. Collapsible. Basic. Hardly a weapon of war. He clicked it once. The metal rod extended with a hiss. It glowed faintly at the tip. But not with energy. With resonance. The cadet tapped it once against his own boot. Then he moved. What followed wasn't a duel. It was a dismantling. Strike after strike landed, Not with force but with intent. Behind the ear. Inside the elbow. Beneath the jawline. Between armored ribs. Each hit made the giant slow. Made his breathing ragged. Made the claws falter. And then, at the end, the cadet did something no predator had done in 10,000 years. He stopped. Thull dropped to one knee, shaking. Eyes wide. Foam at his jaws. And the cadet stood there, silent. "I didn't kill you," he said quietly, "because I didn't come here to kill." He walked forward and looked the dying champion in the eye. "I came here to show you exactly how dangerous mercy can be." The jungle was utterly silent. Every Zarnak watching knew. They were prey now. And the predator had no claws. No armor. Just cold calculation and the knowledge of how to take you apart. One by one, shadows disappeared. The Zarnak fled into the fog. The cadet turned. And a small, thin girl ran to him from the treeline, bruised but alive. He didn't say anything. He just wrapped an arm around her and started walking. But behind them, the last remaining Zarnak, the packmaster himself, descended from the cliff, dragging his blade behind him. He looked at the fallen champion. Then at the retreating human. And dropped to one knee. Not in defeat. But in reverence. A whisper followed in his throat. A word in ancient tongue. Hartan. The one who ends without death. The prophecy was true. The predator that would end the age of predators had come. And he was human. The jungle didn't return to its rhythm after the human left. Birds didn't sing. Insects didn't stir. Even the constant growl of tectonic plates beneath Threxan Prime had gone silent, as if the planet itself held its breath. Zarek Thull lay broken, not dead, not even unconscious, but shattered in a way no being of his stature had ever imagined possible. His body trembled, not from pain but from understanding. He had not been defeated. He had been dissected. And the human had chosen to let him live. Thull had faced death before. Glorious, honorable deaths. But this mercy, this surgical restraint, stripped him of something far deeper than pride. It removed the myth of Zarnak invincibility from the bones of reality and shattered it into dust. He coughed once, a wet sound. Blood hit the ground. Footsteps approached behind him. Soft, measured. The packmaster. "You did not bow," Thull growled, barely able to raise his head. "I did," the packmaster replied solemnly. "To something we were never prepared to understand." Thull bared his fangs. He was small. Unenhanced. Weak. "No," the packmaster whispered. He was human. That word, human, held a new gravity now. Not a species. Not an invader. Not a diplomat. A force. The Zarnak were predators. Perfection carved by evolution and science. But humans? They were something else. Creatures of paradox, fragile yet unbreakable. Limited yet boundless. Primitive in body but divine in adaptability. That cadet hadn't been the strongest, fastest, or even most experienced combatant on the field. But he had done what none of them could. He had won a fight he never should have survived. Not by overpowering, but by outthinking, outmaneuvering, outchoosing. And then he chose mercy. "Gather the fangs," Thull rasped. The packmaster paused. "You can barely move." Thull didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached down and pulled a tooth from his own jaw, a blood-marked symbol of defeat in Zarnak tradition. He placed it at the root of the nearest iron vine tree. "For the jungle," he murmured, "to remember." Then he looked at the packmaster. "This human cannot go unrecorded. He must be witnessed." Witnessed. The packmaster raised a brow. "You mean hunted?" Thull's expression darkened. "No." Followed. A silence passed between them. The shift in doctrine was vast, seismic. The Zarnak never followed. But times were changing. Meanwhile, at the edge of Alliance space, Cadet Elias Kincaid sat alone in the observation deck of the vessel Bright Vow. The ambassador's daughter, now resting under medical care, was safe. The mission, by all technicalities, was complete. But Elias couldn't relax. He hadn't meant for the battle to escalate. He certainly hadn't meant for Threxan Prime to go into collective hibernation the moment he left. He had done what he had to do, nothing more. Nothing personal. Yet the echoes of his choices had already begun to ripple. Fleet Command was silent on the line. Not ignoring him, just processing. He stared out into the void. No stars moved here. This stretch of space was quiet. Cold. Until a voice buzzed behind him. "You embarrassed them." Elias turned. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, broad-shouldered, gray at her temples. Admiral Kyra Vaughn. The same woman who had personally signed the authorization to send him in alone. He stood to attention. Ma'am? She waved him off. Sit. No one else could have pulled that off. Not even our top-ranked combat psyops. Elias hesitated. It wasn't supposed to go that way. Oh, but it did. She stepped forward and joined him at the window. And now the Death World Alliance doesn't know whether to retaliate, invite us to the table, or run screaming into the void. He looked back at the stars. I didn't kill him. That's exactly why they're terrified. Her voice lowered. They would have understood domination, victory, even extinction. But you showed them a restraint they can't replicate. He thought for a moment. I just didn't want to make a martyr, he said. We do that too often. The Admiral nodded approvingly. You're learning. And that scares me more than if you punched through his chest and wore his spine as a medal. She handed him a small data chip. What's this? A request, she said. From the Galactic Cultural Historians. They want to document your encounter. They say it matches a prophecy. Elias narrowed his eyes. Hey, what? An old one, Vaughn said, stepping back. From the time of Thorns. Says the apex of worlds would one day bow to the soft voice that cuts. The one who undoes predators with choices, not claws. He let out a breath. That's poetic. But I'm no messiah. No, she said, smiling faintly. Just a very dangerous man who knows when not to kill. She left. He sat for a while longer, staring into the dark. A flicker passed the viewport. He leaned forward. Another ship. Small. Unmarked. Cloaked until just now. It pulsed once with light. Then disappeared. He frowned. It had been watching him. Back on Threxan Prime. Far beneath the jungle canopy, deeper than any Zarnak had ventured in centuries, ancient vines wrapped around a monolithic stone, an altar worn by time. Beneath it, in a crypt of petrified bone, a machine stirred. Red lights blinked to life. It had been dormant for thousands of years. A genetic key had awakened it. The cadence of that human's footsteps. The resonance of his baton. The exact frequency of his strike rhythm, encoded millennia ago in the core of the forgotten construct. He had spoken the language of the end. The machine sent out a pulse, deep, low, inaudible. A signal buried in planetary tectonics. A message meant only for one type of receiver. And on worlds long since turned to dust, other machines heard it. They woke. The prophecy had not been metaphor. It had been a warning system. And Elias Kincaid had just tripped it. The pulse wasn't loud. It wasn't even detectable by most known sensors. But for those attuned to it, those few ancient architectures buried deep across forsaken worlds, it was like a scream. A call to awaken. To prepare. To remember. Deep in the void between stars, in systems long scrubbed from galactic maps, things began to stir. Not life, not machines, but something in between. Remnants of a civilization so old, it had been written off as myth even by the oldest archivists of the Death World Alliance. And at the center of this activation was Elias Kincaid. The human cadet who had, unknowingly, performed the ritual that had been prophesied not just by the Zarnak, but by the architects of Obsidian Memory, the first empire to span the stars before any modern race had even discovered fire. He had spoken the rhythm, chosen mercy, touched the altar through combat without destruction. And so the warning was relayed. Not to the humans. Not to the Death World Alliance. But to the keepers of the core spiral, who had once sealed themselves away with a singular command. Should the one who cuts light from shadow rise, prepare the stars to break. The seal was breaking now. Threxan Prime, orbit. Repeat that transmission, Admiral Kyra Vaughn ordered, arms locked behind her back as the bridge lights of the bright valve flickered under stress. The comms officer was pale, sweat dripping down his neck. It's not a transmission, ma'am. It's gravitational resonance. Entire tectonic layers under the jungle just shifted into harmonic alignment. It's creating a subspace pattern. Language. The science officer interjected, eyes wide. Mathematical. Predictive. It's an algorithmic countdown. Tied to stellar drift. Ma'am, something ancient is rebooting. Vaughn stared through the viewport at Threxan Prime's surface. This wasn't just a predator bowing to a cadet anymore. This was something older. Much older. Where's Cadet Kincaid? Still in meditation confinement, per your orders. You said to give him space after. Wake him. Now. Meditation quarters, Bright Vow. Elias was already awake. He hadn't slept since Threxan Prime. Not really. It wasn't nightmares that plagued him, but memories that didn't feel like his. Images of structures he'd never seen. Star systems he couldn't name. and a name that echoed through all of it like a whisper behind his skull. Saren. He didn't know what it meant, but it haunted him. The door hissed open. Vaughn entered alone. He looked up. They're waking up, aren't they? She blinked. Who? I don't know, Elias admitted, but I've felt it since I struck him. Since I held back. Vaughn exhaled and sat across from him. This wasn't in the simulations. The diplomats are panicking. The Zarnak are requesting peace talks. And our sensors just picked up resonance patterns in 12 dead systems. Dead? Extinct. Long before us. Places that make neutron stars look gentle. Elias leaned forward, palms clasped. This isn't about war anymore. No, she said. This is about memory. And you've triggered something that was supposed to stay forgotten. Elsewhere, far from Alliance space. On the world of Karethol, where no sun had risen in over 1,000,000 years, a lone monolith split open for the first time since the fall of the obsidian memory. Out of the dust emerged a being with silvered eyes and bone-white skin, a construct without time named Archivist Null. Its first words echoed across the vacuum, translated not by sound but by force. The knife has returned. The stars must bleed clean again. Behind it, others awoke. The Saren doctrine had begun. Back aboard the Bright Vow. In the command chamber, projections now lined the walls. Dead systems blinking back to life. Gravitational anomalies forming perfect geometric patterns across light years. Ma'am, the science officer said, pointing to a new display, we just received a direct signal. Quantum locked. No known origin point. Play it. Was a voice. Not synthetic, not natural. Something in between. To the one who refused to kill, we see you. We feared you. We warned the stars. Now they must choose again. The bridge fell silent. What does it mean? Vaughn muttered. But Elias already knew. They warned the galaxy about us, he whispered. And now that prophecy's no longer theoretical. They buried it deep in time, thinking we'd never reach the trigger. He looked up. But we did. I did. The air felt heavier. Reality itself stretched thinner. Vaughn stepped closer. Then we have to prepare. War? Elias shook his head. No. That's what they'd expect. That's what predators expect. But we don't just fight. We adapt. We think. We connect. He stood. We learn. Zarnak Deathworld, Blood Parliament. In the high citadel of the Predator Kings, a gathering of apex warlords sat in stunned silence. A projection of the human cadet hovered before them. He spared our greatest champion, one hissed. What honor is there in that? Fools, barked the Packmaster. It wasn't mercy. It was control. A message. We are beyond your old definitions of power. The High Fang clicked her mandibles. And now the Saren stir. All heads turned. She nodded gravely. Yes, I know the name. It's in our deepest bones. A war that ended before we were born. A force older than teeth and talons. And that human walked straight into it. Earth, Global Archive Station, Luna Orbit. Back home, human researchers decrypted the resonance pulses into fractal maps. At their center, Earth. The final prophecy was now unfolding. A being with no allegiance, no armor, no enhancement, had become the linchpin of the next galactic cycle. Not because of destruction, but because he showed restraint. Elias wasn't a god. He wasn't a soldier anymore either. He was something else. The first star listener. And as the ancient mechanisms powered on across the stars, one phrase repeated itself in over 50 alien languages. The Predator has bowed. Now the stars must kneel. The Bright Vow no longer felt like a warship. It felt like a cathedral. Not a holy one. No gods were worshipped here, but something older was being respected. Feared. Revered. Studied in silence. The lights were dimmed, but the walls pulsed faintly now, alive with patterns that mirrored the ancient resonance Elias had triggered. The crew spoke in whispers, and even the ambient hum of systems seemed to defer to the weight of something beyond their understanding. Elias stood alone at the ship's observation deck, facing a sight that shouldn't have existed. 12 star systems, once lifeless, now flickering with new radiation patterns, gravitational shifts, and light pulses in sacred geometries. They were awakening. Not with life, but with memory. These weren't resurrection events. They were reminders. Messages coded in physics, in tectonic cadence, in cosmic alignment, only activated because one human cadet refused to kill. And across the galaxy, it hadn't gone unnoticed. Council of Apex Worlds, Emergency Hollow Session. The Zarnak Haifang stood atop her obsidian dais, her claws sheathed, a sign of submission not weakness. Every delegate from the Death World Alliance was present, silent and watchful. The Rosari Bleedlord's many eyes twitched nervously. The Jalari Prism Kin projected abstract fractals, signals of confusion and fear. And yet the Zarnak spoke with clarity. We have been misled. Not by spies or data. By assumption. By our own belief that dominance came only through fangs and fire. That a withheld strike was cowardice. She turned and the central projection displayed Elias. A predator who chooses not to kill is no less dangerous. He is worse. Because he understands power. And he uses it with vision. Murmurs rippled through the delegates. She raised a talon. The prophecy warned us about humans. Not their warships. Not their soldiers. Their choice. Their restraint. That's what shifts the balance of the cosmos. Meanwhile, the core spiral. In the deepest ancient structure yet discovered, Archivist Null had connected all 12 awakened monoliths. The construct stood in a chamber of mirrors, each one showing fragments of history from civilizations long crumbled into dust. Star listener, it said, voice like broken glass folding in on itself. Elias's image appeared in every mirror simultaneously. The test is passed. The memory proves true. The knife has become the mirror. The Saren were not gods. Not invaders. They were curators. Stewards of balance. Each of their warnings wasn't to scare, but to preserve the fragile potential of a future worth inheriting. And Elias, unknowingly, had been the signal that it was safe to pass the torch. The prophecy had always been about one species. Not because humans were the strongest, but because they knew they weren't, and chose still to rise. Aboard the Bright Vow. Signal incoming, the communications officer reported. From all 12 systems. Simultaneously. Vaughn turned to Elias. They're speaking to you. He nodded once. The deck lights dimmed, and then the bridge filled with holograms, not of creatures but of star systems themselves, stylized in Saren language. They pulsed in rhythm like a living organism. Then a voice echoed not from speakers but from the air itself. Elias Kincaid of Earth. We have waited. Observed. Recorded 10,000 wars. 1 billion deaths. You are not our first candidate. But you are our first listener. You did not dominate. You paused. You did not ascend. You understood. For that we give you the final archive. The last truth. Elias stood, silent as information flooded into the ship's databanks. Languages. Technologies. Histories predating even timekeeping itself. And at the center, a warning. A new threat. Something vast. Coming from beyond the known edges of mapped spacetime. The hunger without name. But now, Elias had the map. And a galaxy that, for once, was ready to follow, not through fear but respect. 1 week later, Earth UN Core Assembly. Elias stood before every planetary representative. No medals. No uniform. Just presence. He spoke plainly. The Death World Alliance feared us. Then they studied us. Then they tested us. He raised a hand, holograms flickering to life. Saren star maps. Spiral arm defenses. A new path forward. They found out what we already know. Power isn't just in fire. It's in the hand that holds it back. He smiled faintly. And now they bow. Not to our weapons, but to our choice. The chamber erupted in silent awe. Final scene, Threxan Prime. The site where it all began was now a sanctuary. The altar still stood. The bloodstains had been scrubbed, but the scars in the stone remained, a reminder, a memorial. Not to war, to understanding. A single plaque sat at its base, inscribed in multiple languages. Here the galaxy changed, not by blade or bomb but by the boy who could have killed, and didn't. Above it the stars shifted. Not randomly. Deliberately. As if aligning to write the next chapter. And somewhere deep in space, a warning beacon blinked its last. The Saren were gone. Their duty complete. But humanity's story had just begun. If you've made it to the end of this tale, if you listen like Elias did, if you wondered like the Saren did, then you felt it too. That spark of why. That's what stories like this are for. And if you're ready for more truths buried in forgotten stars, subscribe to the Void Narratives. Join the ones who remember, the ones who question, the ones who choose. The galaxy isn't waiting anymore. Neither should you. Telescope Milky Way. End of story.